enemies to Babylonian rule. Verse 36, if you got a book, you knock chapters, page 16, verse 36. And he said unto him, do not fear, neither be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do to them as you please. And all the men that were about 500, and they fought against their enemies, and they destroyed them and subdued them. And Nimrod placed standing officers over them in the receptive places. And he took some of the children as security. And they were all servants to Nimrod and to his brethren. And Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. And when Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle, after having conquered his enemies, all his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them. And they placed a regal crown upon his head. And he sat over his subjects and people, princes, judges, and rulers, as is the custom among kings. And he placed Terah. Who's Terah? Abraham's father. You guys are going to learn a lot of stuff that you didn't know today about these people's background. And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host. And he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. So Terah, Abraham's father, is the chief prince among the princes of Nimrod. And these were like the Magi, the counselors that gave the king advice. And whilst he was reigning according to his heart desire, after having conquered all his enemies around, he advised with his counselors to build a city for his palace, and they did so. And they found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large, extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of that city that day he built Shinar, for the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. And Nimrod dealt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them. And he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great. And all the nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings. And he became their Lord and King, and they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar. And Nimrod of Noah, and they that were under his power and counsel. And all the earth was of one tongue, and the words of union. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord. Here we go. Started to stray. And he was more wicked than all the men that were before him, from the days of the flood until these days. That's saying a lot. Nimrod was more wicked than the days of the flood, when he wiped out those evil giants. And he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed down to them. And he rebelled against the Lord, and taught all his subjects and all the people of the earth his wicked ways. Told you, Nimrod, founder of the ancient occult religion. And not only that, he's the first Antichrist. He went totally to war against God and Christ, like the Antichrist was going to do in the end. Nimrod did it first. Founder of the ancient occult. And a lot of people believe Nimrod was a giant, and so do I. Based on the pictures I saw, and him standing with people around him, I mean, he looked like a giant. That's the only word you can say. Picture him holding up a lion like a kitty cat. I said, that's a giant. He had a thing for hunting and killing lions, too. He was more wicked than all the men that were before him, from the days of the flood until those days. And the Lord, and he made gods of wood and stone. Nimrod did. And he bowed down to them. And he rebelled against the Lord. And he taught all his neighbors and all his subjects his wicked ways. Martin, his son, was more wicked than his father. And everyone that heard of the acts of Martin, the son of Nimrod, would say concerning him, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, from the wicked go forth wickedness. Pretty much true. That's pretty much true. Genes are a powerful thing. You got a demon seed, or you acting like a demon, you have a demon seed, he's going to probably act like you. Just do genetics alone. And everyone that heard of the acts of Martin, I'm going to read this one more time. The son of Nimrod would say concerning him, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, from the wicked go forth wickedness. And it was current in the words of men from that time to this. Just because of them, they coined the phrase. And Terah saw the sons of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects. And the kings and the princes loved him. And the king and the princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amphiel, the daughter of Cornebo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. Terah was 75 years old when he begat him. And Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days, and dignified him above all the princes that were before him. See, seeing Abraham getting special attention. And it was night that Abraham was born. Now this is where I want you to pay close attention. And it was night that Abraham was born, that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah. And they rejoiced with him on that night, the night that Abraham was born. And when all the wise men and the conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars. They parted the Magi, that's what they do. They were stargazers too. They look for signs, everything. And they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens. And he swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of heavens. And all the wise men of the king and his conquerors were astonished. I guess that would astonish me too. I see a giant star. What flesh and blood is. See a giant star flying across the sky, gobbling up 4 other stars, north, east, west, and south star. When you think of something wrong with you, so maybe I'm delusional, I'm seeing that. Till you have 1,000 people come behind you and say, I saw the same thing. Then they just shut it down, like they've been doing. But these guys, they read them stars, they kept their nose in the heavens. They even built ancient observatories to watch the stars. Man's pretty smart, he just got dumb. He didn't evolve, he devolved. And all the wise men, the king, and the conjurers were astonished at this sight. This is verse 3. This is Jasher 8:3. And all the wise men of the earth and the conquerors were astonished at this sight. And the sages, now sages, the wise people. Magi is all the same. And the sages understood this matter. These guys got it. They knew what that meant. They knew what that sign meant. They thought they were the wise men sitting at the king's court. And the sages understood the matter. And they knew its part or its import. And they said to each other, this only betokens the child that has been born to terror this night, who will grow up and be fruitful. We read this again. And they said to each other, this only betokens the child that has been born to terror this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess the earth, he and his children forever. And he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. And the wise men and the conjurers went home that night. And in the morning, all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, behold, last night is hidden from the king. It has not been known to him. You don't want to hide nothing from the king. The king was to get all information, good or bad. You were to throw it the king's way. Or that could be your head taken off. Especially if it's something that's threatening him. And should this thing be known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, why have you concealed the matter from me? King's going to say, what are you doing? What are you holding out information for? Therefore, now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw and the interpretation thereof. And we shall then remain clear. And they did so. And they all went to the king. This is interesting. They plotting already. You say everybody's about saving their eyes. He's going to say, why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we will also suffer death. Therefore now let us go and tell the king the right which we saw and the consequences thereof. And we all shall then the remain be clear. And they did so. And they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground. And they said, may the king live. May the king live. We heard that a son was born unto Terah, the night of Nahor, the prince, or the son of Nahor, the prince of thy land. And we yesternight came to his house, And we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when that servant went out from the house of Tara to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran, you know what, I remember this a while ago. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the north sides of heaven. And our servants were astonished at the sight. Read this again. This is chapter 8, verse 11. And the servants were astonished at that sight. I would have too. I would have been astonished too. Which we saw, and greatly terrified, as we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew as we made our judgment on the sight and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that the thing applies to the child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly and become powerful and kill all the kings of the earth and inherit all their lands and their seed forever. And now, our Lord and King, read this again. And now, our King, behold, we have only acquainted thee with what we have seen concerning the child. He seemeth good, if it seemeth good to the king, to give his father value for this child. Will we slay him before he should grow up and increase in the land and is evil? This is the one that the stars is giving us revelation on. Why should we let him live? Say it short. He's going to kill our people off by himself. Increase against that dust. Then increase with us that we and our children perish through this evil. Everybody's about self-preservation. He said, we're going to let him live, one baby. It's going to grow up and wipe us all out, wipe out all our descendants out. How should we kill him in his crib? See, anytime Abraham, it's only 3 people that got, at least the Bible records there's only 3. They got a special divine revelation with stars, star treatment. Stars showing signs of their birth. This is Abraham, which a lot of you didn't know this story. Like I believe 99% of people watching didn't know. The God gave a sign in the heavens for Abraham. The second person, they got a sign like this was Moses. And they killed babies trying to get him in Israel. So put flesh and blood on this. These people want to survive. They want their kids and family to survive. And the king heard the words, and they seemed good in his sight. And he sent and called for Terah, and Terah came before the king, Abraham's father. And the king said to Terah, I have been so told a son was yesterday born to thee, and after this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. And now therefore give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil springs up against us. Let me kill your baby, man. And I'm going to pay you. And don't forget what he just did earlier before you judge the king so harsh. You know, he pimped his wife out. Wasn't for God. King was settled as well. So here we go again. Cash for babies. And now therefore give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil springs up against us. And I will give thee for his value thy house full of silver and gold, and a house full of. And Terah answered the king and said unto him, My lord and king, I have heard thy words, and thy servants shall do all that the king desire. But Lord and king, I will tell thee, talking to Nimrod, the king, by the way, I will tell thee what happened to me yesterday night. You're going to stall him with a story. That I may see what evidence now here he is stalling, and I'm going to want you guys to pick up on it. My Lord and King, I will tell thee what happened to me yesterday night, that I may see what the advice the king will give his servant. And then I will answer the king upon what he has first spoken. And the king said, Speak. And Terah said to the king, son of Moriah came to me yesterday, saying, Give unto me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave thee. Give unto me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave thee, and I will give thee silver and gold, and straw and provender for his value. And I said to him, Wait until I see the king concerning these words. The king gave him an exotic horse. It's only one of a kind, literally. It's so rare. And he gave it to Abraham's father. I like this story here. Verse 21. And now, my Lord and King, behold, I have made this thing known to thee, an advice which the king will give unto his servant, that I will follow. And the king heard the words of Terah, and his anger was kindled, and he considered him in the light of a fool. And the king answered Terah and said unto him, Art thou so silly, ignorant, or deficient in understanding, to do this thing, to give thy beautiful horse for silver and gold, or even straw and provender? Art thou so short of silver and gold that thou shouldest do this thing, because thou canst obtain straw and provender to feed thy horse? And what is silver and gold to thee, or straw and provender, that thou shouldest give away the fine horse which I gave thee, like there is none to be had on the whole earth? And the king left off speaking. And Terah said to the king, saying, Like unto this has the king spoken to his servant. Well, you just said, you're going to cash me out to kill my child. And I see, and you see more value in this horse you gave me than my own flesh and blood. This is my flesh and blood we talking about. You cashing in. You giving me house full of silver and gold for my son to kill him. Before me at that. Like he's a cockroach or something. This is my son we talking about. And I beseech thee, Lord and King, that which thou saidest to me, saying, give thy son, that we may slay him, and I will give thee silver and gold for his value. What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? Surely then, at my death, the silver and the gold will return to my king, who gave it. And when the king heard the words of terror and the parable which he brought concerning the king, it grieved him greatly, and he was vexed at this thing, and his anger burned within him. And terror saw that the anger of the king was kindled against him. And he answered the king, saying, all that I have is in the king's power. Whatever the king desired to do to his servant, that let him do. Yet even my son, he is in the king's power, without value in exchange. And his two brothers that are older than he. And the king said to Terah, no, I will purchase thy younger son for a price. You're not going to get out of this without getting some money for me killing him. And Terah answered the king, saying, I beseech thee, my lord and king, to let thy servant speak a word before thee, and let the king hear the word of his servant. And Terah said, let my king give me 3 days' time, till I consider this matter within myself, and consult with my family concerning the word of the king, the words of the king, the words of my king, excuse me. And he pressed the king greatly to agree to this. And the king hearkened to Tar, and he said so, and he gave him 3 days' time, and Tar went out from the king's presence, and he came home to his family and spoke to them all the words of the king, and the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent to Tar, saying, send me thy son for a price, as I spoke to thee. And shouldest thou do this, I will send and slay all that thou hast in thy house. If you don't send that son, I'm killing everybody, including your pets, so that thou shalt not even have a dog remain. And Terah hastened, as the thing was urgent from the king, and he took the child from one of his servants. Took one of the people that worked for him, kid. Took their kid's a kid, to a king. And Terah hastened, as the thing was urgent from the king, and took the child from one of his servants. I'm sure that hurt them, which his handmaiden had born to him that day. And Terah brought the child to the king and received value for him. And Lot was with Terah. And the Lord was with Terah in his manner. Even though that was pretty shisty and grimy, dirty low down for him to do, God agreed. You guys put that in your pipe as well. God agreed to letting Terah murder or have another child murdered from some employees that work for him. And the Lord was and the Lord was with Terah in that manner. I thought I'd read it to you one more time. That Nimrod, God's ways are not our ways. That Nimrod might not cause Abraham's or Abram's death. And the king took the child from Terah. Pay close attention. And the king took the child from Terah, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground, for he thought it had been Abraham or Abram. So he took that kid, and this is a giant. This man's a giant. Very strong. And threw that baby down like that baby was like a ball of wax or something. And the baby took the child from Terah, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground, for he thought he had been Abraham. And this was concealed from him that day. His father did a sneaky move to preserve Abraham's life. And it was forgotten by the king, as it was the will of the providence not to suffer Abraham's death. And Terah took Abraham, his son, secretly, together with his mother and nurse, and he concealed them in a cave. And he brought them their provisions monthly. So every month he went to this cave and dropping off food and water, snacks, and whatever else they would eat. And the Lord was with Abraham in the cave, and he grew up. So Abraham was in the cave. And Abraham was in the cave 10 years. And the king and the princes, soothsayers, and sages thought the king had killed Abram, fooled everybody. And Haran, the son of Terah, Abraham's older brother, took a wife in those days. Haran was 39 years old when he took her. And the wife of Haran conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Lot.